You're listening to the Definitely Deela Podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Deela, and welcome to Discovered Stories. These are stories that I found, and in today's episode, we've got a story that feels like it was ripped straight out of the headlines. But trust me, this story is real. Now, before we jump in, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that one friend, or maybe even yourself, if we're going to be honest, who fell for the wrong person? The kind of love that makes your friends and everyone say, girl, what you got going on? We laugh about it later, but in the moment, love can make people do some wild, out of character things. But what happens when love doesn't just make you look foolish? What happens when love makes you cross a line that you cannot come back from? Today, we're breaking down the story of Vicky White, a respected corrections officer who shocked the world when she not only fell in love with an inmate, but she ran off with him. And the inmate's name is Casey White. Now, as coincidental as it may seem, Casey White and Vicky White are not related, okay? That's the first part. Their escape made national headlines, but what led up to that moment was even more shocking. So let's rewind, unpack, and figure out how a woman with everything to lose risked it all for love, or what she thought was love. Because as we go into this story, we are going to question, was it even love at all? But before we speculate, we've got to take it back to the beginning, way back before Vicky met the man who would turn her life upside down. If this sounds like something that would interest you, hit the notification bell so you can know when we uncover our next story. Let's get into this, okay? I want you to picture a small, sleepy town in Leicester, Alabama. And if I pronounce Leicester wrong, correct me. Among its residents was a young Casey Cole White, a high school football player who seemed like any other teenager, chasing dreams under Friday night lights. But behind his quiet and polite demeanor, neighbors whispered about a missing moral compass, a darkness that would one day spiral out of control. Casey's life took a sharp turn in 2010 when he pleaded guilty to a brutal attack on a male relative with an axe handle. This wasn't a scuffle. It was a violent eruption that landed him a 6-year prison sentence. 6 years for an axe? 6 years. But I digress. Yet, like many twists in his story, his time behind bars was cut short. Like, how do violent offenders get their time cut short? Like, is there a starter pack? Is it like how many Bible studies do you have to attend to be like, you know what? Murderer's Mandy, I think he's out. I think he learned his lesson. Anyhow, we fast forward to December 2nd, 2015, and Casey's name would forever be etched in infamy. Fueled by what seemed to be a jealous rage, he unleashed chaos across Alabama and Tennessee. A crime spree that included home invasions, carjackings, and multiple shootings. Casey was busy being a menace. Among his targets was his ex-girlfriend, whom he tried to unalive along with her 2 roommates. Thankfully, they survived, but unfortunately, the family dog did not. Casey's actions earned him a staggering 75-year prison sentence, and he chillingly vowed that if he ever saw freedom, he would finish what he started with his ex-girlfriend. That alone tells me, even if I didn't know the backstory, that alone tells me he did whatever they said he did. Attempted a wicked crime, and his only regret is not accurately completing it. He followed it with a vow, an announcement, if you will, that if y'all ever let me out if y'all ever let me out, it's up. This isn't the part of the story where we casually just skip over. Like, this doesn't sound like a person or an inmate that you would be so lax around or put your guard down with. I always go over certain, careers that I know I would never be able to do. Not because I'm better than them, because I would not be able to do it efficiently. Like, I've never worked in corrections, but I'm an expert when it comes to me. And I would be requesting 3 additional officers and a canine during all interactions with Mr. White. Oh, y'all can't do that for me? Y'all can't do that? I'm being too dramatic? Okay, well, 2 weeks notice me right now. Just saying, I would be fired. I'd be fired the day that I was assigned. All right, so we all can agree that we have established Casey is a dangerous man. As we proceed, Casey brings us to Connie J. Ridgway, a 58-year-old woman living in Rogersville, Alabama. On October 23rd, 2015, Connie's life was brutally taken in what appeared to be a home invasion. For years, her case went unsolved. Then, in September 2020, Casey White reached out from behind bars. He confessed to unaliving Connie, claiming it was a murder for hire. But Casey's confessions were just as tangled as his psyche. Later, he recanted, leaving investigators piecing together the fragments of his story. So they wonder, did he actually do it? Or is this just an empty confession? Now, as we just went over, his psyche and inconsistencies in his story plays a part into why investigators can't just attach him to the crime. But Casey White seems to be like a man of his word. Even if those words were twisted, there's a saying that goes, there's somebody for everybody. And right now, that saying is definitely undefeated. But despite everything we just went over, the background, the crimes, and the desire to double back and cause harm and do them again, there is someone who meets Casey and sees a misunderstood, gentle giant. Vicky White. We meet Vicky Sue White, a dedicated assistant director of corrections at Lauderdale County Detention Center. Vicky was known for her professionalism. She spent years transporting prisoners, enforcing rules, and maintaining order. She worked in that field for nearly 2 decades. She was a model employee, said Rick Singleton, the sheriff of Lauderdale County, Alabama. And from what I've read online, she was the kind of CO that respected inmates and coworkers all in the same. Because of how she treated everyone, she was well respected by staff and most inmates. It was quoted by the sheriff that some of the older guys looked up to her as a mother figure. All right, so transparency, I've never been in prison. So my data has been taken from cinematic assessments. All right. And from what I've gathered is that in prison, there exists a hierarchy of power where those who are weaker or more vulnerable, sometimes they often fall victim to violence and exploitation. And like I said, Vicky was looked at as a mother figure to some of the inmates because if she was on watch and she was aware that an inmate had a safety concern, she would take initiative to switch a targeted inmate to a different location. Awareness, initiative, and compassion were 3 qualities that were frequently mentioned when asked about Vicky. But her life outside of the detention center was less fulfilling. Vicky was a widow with no children, an empty nest of unfulfilled dreams. When Casey arrived at the detention center, their paths crossed. Despite the 18-year age gap and the glaring red flags of Casey's criminal past, something sparked. I don't know what that something is, but it sparked. While you're listening, I want you to really think about this. Do you think people fall in love with a person for who they truly are or with who they want that person to be? Their potential. Their potential. Because I'm thinking, Casey wouldn't have made it on Pop the Balloon. Too tall. Is that a plaid shirt? I don't like the way your jeans are hemmed. Murder. Like, he would have been gone. Casey would have been gone. Over time, their interactions grew more personal, with Vicky extending privileges to Casey, extra food, I'm assuming, special treatment. Like, now hold up. This may sound like minor privileges. And again, no, I've never been to prison. But from the data I've collected, from those who chose to see for themselves, these are major privileges inside prison. So word assumingly traveled, but it didn't fall on the ears of anyone who would or could do anything about it. It's a no-brainer that this conduct between corrections officer and inmate violates a code of conduct. Not only did it do that, but it put Vicky and other staff and inmates at high risk, and I'm pretty sure would be punishable by termination of employment and would land her on the other side of the law as well. This relationship had been kept under wraps, so Vicky and Casey found ways to communicate via letters, love notes, and phone calls. Casey showered Vicky with compliments. And y'all know what compliments do to a woman who's lonely. Okay? Like, I can imagine, like, that uniform fits you right, Officer Vicky. You looking beautiful today, Officer Vicky. Being the apple in the eye of such a tall, sweet giant put a pep in Vicky's step. Where she once used to stomp the yard doing check-ins was now replaced with a sway, a rhythm in her hips, if you will. And very quickly thereafter, a relationship grew into what they both proclaimed as love for one another. After a while, Casey was checking Vicky like, don't be smiling and being too friendly with these inmates. I'm not, Casey. I just had to transport them to court. It's nothing, I promise, baby. From the looks of things, Vicky is taking it too far and she is too far gone. There's no backpedaling. And with Casey facing a lifetime of years in prison for his previous crimes, she's not letting anyone, not even prison, not even a prison sentence, come in between their love. And we've seen in the past, Casey's made plans to use force, weapons to facilitate his escape. But for whatever reason before, it was unsuccessful. But we know enough that Casey lives by the motto, if at first I don't succeed, I promise I'm going to try again. So they plan together a great escape, one that would free him from incarceration and free them from their love that is bondage. I'm sure the more they talked about it, dreamt about it, caked on the phone about it, all common sense was left. It disintegrated into their plan that seemingly stood attainable and flawless. She most likely didn't even see that she was self-destructing. Which brings me to a question, and let me know. At what point does loyalty cross into self-destruction? Because there is a point. By April 2022, Vicky had made irreversible decisions. She sold her home below market value, purchased a getaway car, a 2007 Ford Edge, and set her retirement date for April 29th. April 29th was not just any ordinary day. April 29th was the exact same day she would transport Casey to what she claimed was a mental health evaluation. This was no mental evaluation. This was Operation White Love on the Run, no pun. On that fateful morning of April 29th, Vicky set up the play. Miss Vicky, you all right? You don't look so good. I'm feeling horrible. I could hear her now. I don't know what's going on. Are you sure you don't want to head home? We could find coverage. Oh, no, that's not necessary. It's probably something I ate. I have 2 more transports today, then I'm gonna stop at urgent care before heading home. Like I said, Miss Vicky was a dedicated worker, rarely called off, always picked up extra shifts, always there when you needed. So her decision to just get through the day, it didn't raise any eyebrows or any suspicion. But what they didn't know was that Vicky only intended to do a single transport, which was Casey. But there was no mental health evaluation scheduled. Time passes during the day and the jail realizes there is no sign of Vicky or Casey. Staff continually make attempts to contact Vicky to check her status and location, but all attempts go unanswered. Of course, they fear for their fellow officers' safety. She's an older woman, one-on-one with a repeated violent offender who, if given the opportunity, can possibly harm Vicky in seconds. This is now all hands on deck. Neighboring counties are notified, and they've all known that there's a potentially hostage situation. By the time authorities piece it together, Vicky and Casey have vanished, leaving behind an abandoned cruiser and a trail of questions. When the pair found themselves in a web of pursuit, it forced them to make the decisions to switch cars. This was not part of their plan, and I'm sure it increased frustration, probably shortened temper, and hope began to vanish. Reality had come crashing down like a tsunami, sweeping away the foundation of their once flawless escape plan. The carefully crafted vision of freedom shattered in an instant, and what had started as hope spiraled into pure desperation. For Casey, survival was nothing new. It was a rhythm he'd learned to dance to a long time ago. But for Vicky, this was a harsh, unfamiliar world, one where she'd never anticipated. I imagine the weight of it was starting to settle in on her, and waves of truth started to sink in post-crime clarity. She had destroyed everything she spent decades building. The life she once knew, the sense of control she'd held, now felt like an illusion. And she saw the brutal reality of prison, The quality, the conditions, the constant struggle day to day, it was a life she could never have imagined for herself, let alone endure the thought of going from correctional officer to a prisoner, stuck in the very same detention center where she once had power. That must have shattered her psyche and sense of self. The psychological toll of it must have been unimaginable, and it was clear that it could break her in ways that might never heal. I could almost hear her thoughts racing, like interrupted by the cold, forceful tone of Casey. He's barking out orders now, because remember, right now, you're not the loving Casey I knew in our prison home. Right now, his voice is sharp, urgency, cursing, yelling, something that she probably hadn't heard from him before. His commands were confusing and jumbled, fragmented. I'm sure executive functioning skills are crashing. Step one by one, each after one, reminding her how little she had truly thought this through. I'm sure at some moment it clicked, like the plans which they have concocted together in the chaos that made sense turned into a living nightmare. In that moment, I can almost see Vicky realize, wow, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? I'm sure that question echoed in her mind. She may not have been able to say it to Casey, but I'm sure she was thinking, what have I done to my life? Vicky and Casey were on the run from police for nearly 2 weeks, which led to an 11-day manhunt. Authorities finally ended up seeing a gray Cadillac that was outside of a Motel 6. Police were ordered to stand back and waited until the couple exited the hotel and then went into a high-speed chase. The chase ended with the couples crashing into a ditch. As the police gave orders to put their hands up outside the car and exit, there was a loud pop. According to reports, Casey surrendered to the U.S. Marshal after the crash and kept pleading with them to check on his wife. One of his statements were so odd. He was like, she has a head injury from a weapon, and it wasn't me. I didn't do it. It doesn't sound like something you would say if your partner committed, an act to unalive themselves. I can understand, check on my wife. She's pulled it. It just, do you get what I'm saying? Like in that moment, clearing your name of unaliving her was at the forefront. So allegedly, Vicky made the decision to perform that ending act against herself. I will say it's not hard to believe that she did that. I mean, in her shoes, if you can try to put yourself there, we're caught now. We'll never be together. And again, I've never been in a high-speed chase. So on top of it, I can only assume that she's wigging out during this high-speed chase. So he's seeing and hearing her scream, seeing her unravel, and maybe he even thought she wouldn't be able to handle a lifetime in prison, but who knows? He said she was the one who pulled the trigger. That's what they wrote it off as. So let me know in the comments, do you feel the same or do you think she made a decision to do it herself? Let me know in the comments, do you think he possibly, assisted, or do you think that she made that decision to do it to herself? Vicky was transported to the hospital for the head wound, but she did not survive. And Casey was sentenced to life in prison in June 2023 after pleading guilty to the escape. Why would Vicky risk everything for Casey? That was the question that rang from the county to all across the world. Perhaps she saw him not as the dangerous criminal, but as a misunderstood soul in need of redemption. A redemption she believed she could offer. Over time, her empathy may have blurred into something more, a fantasy of escape, love, and freedom. But the reality of life on the run with a man like Casey is far from romantic or realistic. With his violent history and her dwindling resources, the dream they chased was likely to unravel into a dead end. This story isn't just about a prison escape. It's a cautionary tale about how emotions, attraction, and a yearning for purpose can cloud judgment. Vicky traded a stable life for a fleeting fantasy, and Casey's history suggests he may have soon seen her as disposable. Their story captivates because it's a cocktail of forbidden love, danger, and desperation. A real-life drama where the stakes are freedom, safety, and survival. What are your thoughts? Could Vicky have saved herself from this path? Or was she doomed from the moment she fell for Casey's southern charm? I think if it wasn't Casey, it would have probably been someone else. someone else she would have fall for, went behind. She seemed ready to lose herself in someone or anything that felt like it resembled love. And although I can't wrap my head around what happened, why she did it, that person was Casey, and he provided that for her. Is it possible that we all have a breaking point where love can make us do the unthinkable? Or do you think that's just an excuse? All right, there we have it. That's the story of Vicky White and Casey White, a woman who had everything to lose and still chose to risk it all. Was it love, desperation, or something deeper? That's a question we will never fully know. If you're watching on YouTube, drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you're listening on the podcast, hit me up on socials because I want to know what you think about this story. Go ahead and share this episode if you have a friend like us who enjoys getting deeper into discovered stories, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. As always, take care of yourselves, and I hope you join me next time on the Definitely Deela Podcast.